Okay, let's just unpack this for a second. I want you to picture a standard movie budget. On one side, you have got these massive bloated Hollywood blockbusters. Hundreds of millions of dollars, marketing campaigns that cost more than the GDP of a small country. And on the other side, you have a film made for rupees 30 crore, which is what in dollars? Roughly 3.5 million? I mean, in the world of superhero cinema, that's effectively zero. It's a rounding error on a Marvel spreadsheet. It's nothing. But then, this same tiny film goes out and grosses over 300 crore worldwide. That's a 10x return. Classic David versus Goliath happening right now in Indian cinema. And here's the thing, if we only focus on the money, we are completely missing the point. The numbers are actually the least interesting part of this whole story. Because we are not talking about some generic action flick that just got lucky. We are talking about Lokah Chapter 1 Chandra, a Malayalam regional film from 2025 about a 500-year-old female vampire hiding out in modern Bangalore apartment. And it did something Hollywood and Bollywood had been telling us is impossible for the past decade. It broke superhero fatigue. Not by doing more of the same, but by doing the complete opposite. The entire industry was zigging, and this movie just zagged. So let's set the stage. Let's talk about where our heads were in 2024. What was the vibe? The vibe was exhaustion, total saturation. By 2024, audiences everywhere were suffering from serious superhero burnout. We all knew the formula by heart. The reluctant hero, the training montage, the big sky beam, the city destroying finale where CGI armies clash, and it all becomes this mechanical thing. Like watching the same movie on a loop, just with different colored costumes. And Indian cinema was trying so hard to copy that homework. You had Ravan way back, which spent rupees 150 crore basically trying to turn Shah Rukh Khan into Iron Man. That did not work. Then more recently, you had Brahmastra, massive hype, 400 crore rupee budget, immense visual ambition. But here's the critique, and this is crucial. It still felt like they were copying the Marvel template, like they were trying to fit these ancient Indian concepts into a Western superhero box. So it was, here's our version of the Infinity Stones, not here's a story that could only happen in India. You know what I mean? But then on the other side, you had the whole pan-Indian craze, the KGFs, the Pushpas, and look, these films were not copying Marvel, not at all. But they were operating on this very specific frequency, hyper masculinity, raw power, violence, male dominance. The heroes are these unstoppable forces of nature. They walk into a room, things explode, guys fly through the air, everyone cheers, we know the drill. These films found massive commercial success, genuine craft in their action choreography, but they also raised some uncomfortable questions about what they were celebrating. The glorification of violence, women barely existing as characters, this fantasy of individual masculine dominance over corrupt systems. So the landscape is basically either copycat superhero movies or ultra macho blockbusters. Not a lot of room in between. And then walks in Lokah, which did not copy Marvel and definitely did not copy the KGF formula. It centered a female protagonist, a monster, and stripped away all the glamour. Made on 30 crore rupees, grossed over 300 crore rupees worldwide. But this was not some surprise hit that just exploded out of nowhere. This was deliberate. This was the launchpad for Lokah's cinematic universe, a planned 5-chapter saga from producer Dalkir Salman's Wayfarer films. Think about that for a second. A regional film in Malayalam, steeped in folklore most Indians have never even heard of, and it outperformed big budget pan-Indian spectacles. And I think what it proved is this. A film does not need to appeal to everyone to succeed massively. It needs to be specific, authentic, and formally brilliant. Because You don't beat superhero fatigue by making another superhero movie. You beat it by making heroism feel strange again, dangerous, ancient, lonely. And you do that through the actual filmmaking itself. How you shoot it, how you score it, how you structure the story. So let's talk about the visual language, because this is where the movie really starts to set itself apart. The cinematographer Nimish Ravi paints Bangalore in neon noir. And that doesn't sound like a superhero movie at all, does it? I mean, usually superhero films are bright, clean, digital. You want to see the suit. You want to sell the merchandise. But neon noir here means the palette is all searing reds and electric blues. And here's the thing. These aren't warm, cozy colors. They are harsh. They feel chemical, almost toxic. It's not that nice sunset glow. It's like the city itself is glaring at you. Beautiful, but hostile. And look at how they frame Chandra, the protagonist. In a typical superhero movie, think Tony Stark, think Rocky from KGF, the camera worships the hero. We get that low angle shot to make them look huge. The classic hero shot. You know they are going to win just by how they are standing. Lokah refuses to give you that comfort. Chandra is almost always in shadow. Her face is half hidden. She moves through these streets like a ghost. The whole visual approach is designed very intentionally to make you feel uncomfortable, uncertain. We sense something is wrong. Something is different about her. Not because the film tells us, but because of how she is photographed. The visuals are doing the work. Compare this to any Western superhero film. The first time we see Tony Stark or Steve Rogers, the camera loves them. The lighting is flattering. The framing is heroic. We are meant to immediately identify with them. Lokah refuses this. It makes us uncertain about Chandra. And that uncertainty, that's the foundation of everything that follows. Now, if the visuals create alienation, the sound creates mythology. The composer Jakes Bijoy, his score deliberately avoids those conventional heroic anthems. There's no rousing theme when Chandra does something heroic. No musical cue telling you to cheer. Instead, he is weaving orchestral strings, tribal percussion, and electronic sounds together. The goal isn't to make you root for Chandra. It is to keep her mysterious, keep her at a distance. But here's the most inventive element, and I genuinely think this is brilliant. They created an entirely new language. Wait, let me say that again. They created a language from scratch for the soundtrack. It's called Mozhika. Bijoy teams up with this lyricist, B.K. Harinarayanan, and they construct a language specifically for this film. This isn't gibberish. It's a functional language with its own grammar designed to sound ancient and indigenous to Kerala. So when we hear Mozhika in the score, we are hearing something that does not belong to our world. It separates the supernatural from the mundane. It gives the film's ancient lore its own voice. And here's what's crucial about this choice. It refuses to use Sanskrit or any pan-Indian religious language. This is Kerala's folklore speaking in Kerala's voice. This matters because so much of Indian popular culture defaults to this homogenized North Indian Hindu-inflected idea of mythology. When Brahmastra wanted to evoke ancient India, it used Sanskrit and Hindu iconography, which makes sense given its source material. But it also reinforces this particular cultural dominance. Lokah refuses that. Mozhika is saying Kerala's tribal folklore deserves its own sonic identity. It does not need to be filtered through mainstream frameworks. This is world building at the level of sound. The film does not just tell you this world is different, it makes you hear the difference. Now here's what's fascinating. Lokah looks like a superhero film. It markets itself as a superhero film, but it refuses to actually be one. We watch Chandra navigate late night streets, evade unwanted attention, survive in a city that treats women as prey. For the first act, this plays like gritty urban realism, almost a crime thriller about a woman trying to stay invisible. Then the film reveals what Chandra is, a Yakshi, a creature from Kerala folklore. Now, in traditional stories, Yakshis are female spirits who seduce and kill men. They are objects of male fear and fantasy. Beautiful, dangerous, fundamentally other. The classic femme fatale taken to its extreme. Lokah takes this figure and does something radical. It makes her a protagonist. It gives her interiority, history, trauma. It asks, what does the world look like from the Yakshi's perspective? And the film suggests something really interesting. Chandra is not a monster. She is a survivor of genocide. Yakshis were once a tribal people, systematically exterminated. Chandra is one of the last of her kind, living in hiding, trying to navigate a world that's forgotten her people even existed. And this changes the entire movie. The film is not about a superhero discovering her powers and learning to save the world. It's about a traumatized survivor trying to stay alive in a hostile environment. It's about historical erasure, about what happens to cultures that lose their wars. So the film blends genres because Chandra's experience doesn't fit into one box. Not just a hero. She is a refugee from history. It's a part noir, part horror, part social realism. And the structure reflects this. It does not build toward this triumphant finale where Chandra saves Bengaluru. It builds toward Chandra confronting her own past, her own trauma, her own impossible position in this world. Now you might be thinking, okay, this sounds heavy. How does this work as entertainment? And that is where the film's tonal control becomes crucial. Because look, Lokah is balancing its political weight with genuine genre pleasures. This is a film with things to say about caste violence, state power, historical trauma, but it never feels like a lecture. It weaves its politics into the fabric of the story, makes them inseparable from the genre entertainment. The film offers real thrills. Chandra's confrontations are visceral and frightening. The action sequences are not CGI spectacles, they are grounded, brutal, they carry actual stakes. When Chandra uses her abilities, it's not triumphant, it's desperate, it's survival. But the film also allows moments of dark humor. Chandra's interactions with Charlie, her Odian ally, provide levity without undercutting the film's seriousness. Their relationship, two supernatural beings trying to navigate modern Bengaluru, has this sardonic edge that keeps the film from becoming oppressively grim. Director Jitin Isaac Thomas gets something important here. Political filmmaking does not require abandoning entertainment. It requires making your politics inseparable from your storytelling. Every action sequence, every character choice, every visual decision reinforces what the film is saying about power, violence, and history. This is sophisticated stuff. It's trusting you to keep up, to handle the complexity. So let's talk about what this film is actually saying. Because Lokah is fundamentally about resistance to dominant narratives, both patriarchal and nationalist. But it gets there through folklore, through genre, through Chandra's specific story. Okay, so in traditional folklore, Yakshis are basically male anxiety given form. They are beautiful women who lure men to their deaths. Cautionary tales about desire and danger. Lokah inverts this completely. It suggests that the Yakshi myth might itself be a patriarchal distortion, that what we call monsters might be victims rewritten as threats, that the stories we tell about dangerous women might be hiding stories of violence done to women. Watch how the film handles male characters. Almost every man Chandra encounters sees her as an object, to desire, to exploit, to control. The film does not make this explicit, it just shows it repeatedly through small movements and interactions. When Chandra fights back, when she uses her powers against men who threaten her, the film does not portray this as villainy, it presents it as survival, as justified rage, as the only form of power available to someone the world has systematically disempowered. This is a radical reframing of the superhero narrative. Superhero films typically celebrate power used to maintain order. The hero stops the villain, saves the day, the status quo is restored. Maybe slightly reformed, but fundamentally intact. Lokah questions this entirely. It asks, what if the status quo is the problem? What if the existing order is built on violence and erasure? What if heroism is not about maintaining that order, but about surviving despite it? And I know this might sound like I am reading too much into an action movie, but stay with me, because the film's political critique extends beyond gender to questions of national identity itself. Pan-Indian blockbusters often trade in this particular kind of nationalism. Not necessarily explicit political messaging, but this celebration of power, might, masculine strength that becomes aligned with national pride. Think of how RRR frames its heroes. They are fighting British colonialism, yes, but they are doing it through these spectacular displays of superhuman strength. The film is thrilling, but it is also dealing in fantasies of power that can easily slide into authoritarian hero worship. Lokah takes a completely different approach. It's deeply regional, it's rooted in Kerala's folklore, in Kerala's particular history of tribal communities and their erasure. It does not try to represent all of India. It represents one corner of India, one set of stories, one cultural memory. And by doing this, it is making this subtle but important argument that Indian identity is plural, not singular. That there is no one Indian mythology, no one Indian story. That the specificity of regional cultures is valuable precisely because it resists homogenization. The film's villain represents the forces that try to erase this plurality. The forces that want one story, one history, one acceptable version of the past. The film positions Chandra's survival as resistance to both patriarchal violence and nationalist erasure, two forms of domination that often work together. This is political filmmaking that works through metaphor and structure rather than speeches. The film does not lecture you about feminism or pluralism, it just embodies those values in its very existence. So at its core, Lokah is asking this simple question: what is a hero? Western superhero films have a clear answer. A hero is someone with extraordinary abilities who uses those abilities to protect others and maintain order. The hero might be reluctant, might struggle with responsibility, but ultimately accepts their role as protector and savior. Lokah questions every single part of this. Chandra has extraordinary abilities, yes, but those abilities don't make her feel powerful. They make her feel isolated, marked, dangerous to herself and others. Her powers are not a gift, they are a burden, a constant reminder of what was done to her people. The heroism in Chandra's context can't be about maintaining order, because the existing order is the problem. It is the order that erased her people, that forces her to hide, that sees her as a threat simply for existing. So what does heroism mean for someone in Chandra's position? The film's answer is survival, witness, refusal to disappear. Heroism is not about saving the world, it's about surviving in a world that wants you dead and refusing to let your people's story be forgotten. This is a profound rethinking of superhero narrative. It centers not power but powerlessness, not triumph but endurance, not the maintenance of order but resistance to erasure. And it does this while still delivering on genre expectations. Chandra does fight, she does use her abilities, she does confront threats, but these moments are contextualized differently. They are not triumphant, they are necessary. They are what she has to do to stay alive. Compare this to how most superhero films end. The hero typically defeats the villain in this spectacular climax, saves the city, gets celebrated, order is restored. The hero has proven his worth, credits roll. Lokah ends differently. I won't spoil it, but the film's conclusion is not triumphant. It's ambiguous, melancholy, unresolved, because Chandra's struggle isn't the kind that can be resolved in one battle. The forces that threaten her, historical erasure, systematic violence, cultural forgetting, can't be defeated. They can only be resisted, survived, witnessed. This is why the film feels fresh despite superhero fatigue. It is using all the trappings of superhero cinema to tell a story that is not really a superhero story at all. It is using the genre to explore questions about identity, memory, and survival that superhero films typically avoid. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Because Lokah Chapter 1 is explicitly the first installment of a planned 5-chapter saga. This isn't sequel bait. This is a deliberate, architected cinematic universe mapped out from the beginning. And here's what makes this universe different from every failed attempt at cinematic universes in Indian cinema. It's not trying to be Marvel. It's not trying to create this roster of interchangeable heroes who occasionally team up for a big crossover event. It's building a world. The Lokah cinematic universe is rooted in the supernatural folklore of Kerala. Each chapter will presumably explore different aspects of this mythology, different creatures, different corners of this hidden world that exists right alongside our own. We have already been introduced to some of the key players. Yakshis like Chandra, Odians like Charlie, Chartans like Michael, who apparently has 389 siblings, that's 389 potential characters, each with their own stories, their own powers, their own place in the world. I mean, think about the scale here. This is a world building on an ambitious level, but it is grounded in something real. In ancient folklore, actual regional mythology that has existed for centuries. The film is not inventing this world from scratch. It's excavating it, bringing it to light, giving it cinematic form. And because it is rooted in folklore, it has this internal consistency and logic that invented universes often lack. These creatures have rules, they have hierarchies, relationships, histories. The film does not have to explain everything from scratch because the mythology already exists. It just has to dramatize it effectively. This is the blueprint for how to build a sustainable cinematic universe in Indian cinema. Do not copy Marvel. Do not invent generic fantasy worlds. Dig into your own regional folklore. Find the stories that have been told for centuries and bring them to the screen with the craft and seriousness they deserve. Which creature from Kerala folklore do you want to see in chapter 2? Drop your predictions in the comment. So let us bring this home. What does Lokah actually prove? First, and this is huge, regional specificity is not a limitation, it's a strength. For years, the trend in Indian cinema has been towards pan-Indian films. Movies designed to appeal to every region, every language group, every demographic. The theory was that to succeed nationally, you had to sand off all the regional rough edges, make it generic enough that everyone could relate. Lokah proves that theory wrong. This is deeply specifically Malayalam film, rooted in Kerala's folklore, Kerala's landscape, Kerala's cultural memory. It does not try to appeal to everyone, and yet it succeeded everywhere. Why? Because specificity creates authenticity. When a film is deeply rooted in a particular place and tradition, audiences can feel that. Even if they do not know the folklore, even if they are not from Kerala, They can sense that this is a real world built on real cultural foundations. That specificity makes the film feel more authentic than any attempt at generic pan-Indian appeal ever could. Second, you don't need to copy the West to make world-class genre cinema. For too long, Indian attempts at superhero films have been exercises in imitation. Take Western superhero conventions, add some Indian aesthetics, hope it works. Copy the homework and change the names. Lokah does the opposite. It starts with Indian folklore and asks, what does a superhero story look like if it's built from this foundation? And the answer is something that looks nothing like a Marvel film, yet functions just as effectively as genre entertainment. This is the path forward. Do not adapt Western genres with Indian characters. Build Indian genres from Indian stories. Third, feminist filmmaking and commercial successes are not mutually exclusive. This is a film that centers a female protagonist, that critiques toxic masculinity and nationalism, that positions itself against the dominant trends in pan-Indian cinema, and it made 10 times its budget. Audiences are not rejecting feminist perspectives, they are rejecting bad films. When you make something sophisticated and narratively compelling that happens to have feminist politics, audiences will show up. Fourth, you can be politically engaged without being preachy. The film has things to say about caste violence, state power, nationalism, historical trauma, but it never feels like a lecture. This is how political filmmaking should work. Not through speeches or obvious metaphors, but through structure, character, the very bones of the narrative. And finally, there's this massive appetite for cinematic universes built from regional folklore. The success of this film isn't a fluke. It's evidence that audiences are hungry for stories they have not seen before, for mythologies beyond the mainstream Hindu epics, for worlds that feel genuinely new. Here's my claim, and I recognize this is bold. In 10 years, we might look back at Lokah the way we look back at Iron Man, as the film that proved a new model could work, that showed how regional folklore could anchor a commercially successful cinematic universe. Now, whether it actually achieves that legacy, that depends on the 4 chapters to come, and whether other filmmakers follow this blueprint. But the potential is here, the foundation is laid. The Yakshi is in the neon city and she is here to stay. If this analysis opened your eyes to how sophisticated filmmaking actually works, do me 3 favors. Like this video so the algorithm knows people care about deep analysis. Subscribe because I am breaking down more films that deserve this level of attention. And share this with someone who still thinks superhero movies are all the same. And if you have not watched Lokah yet, seriously, what are you waiting for? Go watch it. Then come back and tell me if I am right about everything I just said. Comment below if you think this comparison to Iron Man holds, or if you think I am completely overhyping this film. I genuinely want to know what you think. I will see you in the comments, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.